Now, if John were here today, what he would say is this here episode is about manual mode. John isn't here today. He's off having some fun doing another project that should be coming up soon. For now, he's stuck me with a tough job of telling you how to use manual mode. Manual mode is the M on the dial. Well, I'm going to tell you about manual mode, at least how to get started on it. I'm not going to do a really great job about teaching you all the ins and outs of everything in manual mode, but I'm going to teach you at least enough, hopefully, that you can get started using manual mode right away. What we're going to do today is take some really dumb pictures of this 30mm dummy round. And they're going to have bad lighting, some might be out of focus, composition's not going to be that great, but hopefully we get our exposure right. Because that's all this video is about, is to teach you how to get the right exposure with your camera in manual mode. In manual mode, you have to pick your shutter speed and your aperture manually. You usually use a couple dials on the camera to do that, or one dial and then push the button and turn the dial a little bit to adjust it here and there.
The first thing we want to do is find the dials on the camera that you're going to use. On this Canon, there's one on the top and there's one on the back. And you see the meter there is a little blinking light. Now, when we want to adjust the exposure, we turn one of the wheels, like the one on the back here, and then that brings the exposure right into the middle of the meter. Or we can adjust the one on the top back and forth, and that'll adjust the exposure just the same way as the back one. But we want to try to get that meter right in the middle. But when we do this, we're going to be looking through the camera's viewfinder, and that meter's on the bottom. You see the little thing in green that shows that it's a little negative on this first one, and it looks a little different from camera to camera. Here it's towards the plus side, but it's still that little thing on the bottom in green. The concept's the same. You just want to turn the knobs until you bring that into the middle. That'll get your exposure right. That means the level of light for your image will be right. Now, we're not going to worry right away about whether a higher shutter or a higher aperture number is better. We're just going to try to get that in the middle. That gets your exposure right. That is the first step to learning how to use manual mode. If you don't see it right away, you might want to tap the shutter button. The shutter button will wake it up and measure the light for whatever the camera's pointed at. That's why you want to look through the viewfinder, not just look at the top here. That way you know that the light exposure is being metered for what you want to take the photo of, and then you get that dial to get the exposure number right in the middle.
We're not going to be able to teach you which button on your camera you have to use if you don't have two dials, because every camera is a little different, but you're going to have to look in your manual for that, because we can't cover every camera in a couple-minute video here teaching you about manual mode. Manual mode is really handy down the line. You'll see when we're taking some more fun pictures and we're out in the field doing things, why you might want to use a bigger aperture or a smaller aperture value or a faster shutter speed or a slower shutter speed. We'll get to all that later, but for today, let's just focus on getting the right exposure in manual mode. Let's get started. For this, you want to probably make sure your camera isn't in auto ISO. Auto ISO can kind of screw up your settings and make it a little more tricky to figure out what's going on. So make sure your camera is set to a single ISO value, and we'll figure out how to adjust the shutter and aperture to get the right exposure in that value. If they're way out of range, you'll have to adjust your ISO and then come back and adjust your shutter and your aperture. But for now, let's just focus on the two controls that you have to set in manual mode most of the time to get the right exposure. That would be your shutter speed and your aperture value.
Now, taking a look through the viewfinder, first we have to tap that shutter button and turn that meter on, and it just so happens that it's right in the middle. Looks pretty good. So rather than play with any of the knobs yet, let's just take a picture and see how it turns out. Now let's see what happens when we dial it down a little bit. We're going to go to a higher aperture value, which puts that meter over into the negative, which should make it darker. As you can see, we can be a little bit off we're still on the meter, so let's crank it down even lower and see if we get anything that comes out. Now let's turn it up the other way and let's try to get back into where a good exposure would be. That's not too bad, but let's get that meter right in the middle and get the right light balance. Okay, now let's see what happens when we go over the other direction. We're on the positive side and overexposing here. It's a little too bright. You can even go brighter. You can go a stop or two too bright and still have some picture, but you see the white levels there are just so marked out that you're not going to be able to see the details in the image. So we've got to crank it back down, get it in the middle, get the right exposure here. Now hopefully you're seeing where turning that aperture value up and down really makes a difference in your exposure. You can definitely get it set too bright and not get a very good exposure. And you can definitely get it too dark. So let's get it back in the middle. See that meter there is right in the middle again. Let's take a picture. And this one's pretty good. You know, we could adjust it in post later, but for now it's pretty good. And then if we turn it the wrong way and get it too dark, we see that we lose a lot. And when it's too dark, you see the darker areas in the image start to get a little bit of noise in them if the ISO is too high, or they're just washed out, and when you try to dial them back up, they don't turn out as good. So what you really want to do is adjust that meter until you get it right into the middle, like this. Now that you have an idea what's going on here, let me run you through a few values. Let's get the exposure right in the middle here and take an image. So we're going to get it centered there. We'll take our image, and we're at f2 and 1/100th of a second. Now, if you hadn't noticed before, those numbers don't have to stay the same. I can slow my shutter speed down a little bit, or change my aperture a little bit. That meter still looks like it's in the middle. Now we're at 1/50th of a second, and f2.8. Now I can keep turning them and take a slower shutter speed and a higher aperture value, and I still have good exposure. I can also keep going here and go down to 1/15th of a second and f4.5, and I still have good exposure. And I keep cranking this, and I get that meter in the middle and get 1/100th of a second at f1.6 and still get a good exposure. So the trick is to get it in the middle, regardless of what's going on. Now let's get a better idea of what's going on here. I'm going to start down at an exposure at f1.4 and a pretty quick shutter speed at 1/200th of a second. And then I'll step it up a little bit. I'll go to f1.6 and didn't really have to adjust my shutter speed yet. It's kind of a small step there. The exposure still comes out okay. Now I'm going to take it up a little bit more. I'm going to go up to f1.8 and still didn't really have to change my shutter speed much, 1/125th of a second. I'm going to jump up a little more here to f2.5, and now we're going to see that my shutter speed is got to be a little slower. It's 1/60th of a second. I'm going to ramp it up here eventually to f5, but if you're paying close attention, you'll notice the exposures stay the same, but those little dots in the background are coming more and more into focus. They're some thumbtacks I stuck in the wall behind the 30mm dummy round, and with each one of these shots, those get a little sharper and a little more in focus. You can't see that in the viewfinder. In the viewfinder, it always looks the same. That's why you have to kind of know eventually what the different aperture values will do. Don't worry about that right now. The big point to take away here is that you can have a lot of different values where you get that meter right in the middle. And what's really important is that you get the meter in the middle so you get a good exposure. Now, the tricks like I'm going to show you here with the depth of field, that's a little different. We will get to this, but let me show you the difference real quick here. Now, if you look at the one image, it has the background pretty good in focus at f5, and if you look at the one where the background's not in focus very well at f1.4, sometimes that's kind of a cool effect, and we'll get to learn more about this later. But for now, at least hopefully you're started down the road to learning about exposure and getting the right light values in manual mode on your camera.
Hopefully this gets you started in manual mode, and down the road we're going to teach you how to use some of these settings to your advantage and get a really interesting picture. We're going to go out and take some pictures. We're going to do some different photo shoots, but right now we're just wrapping up the basic controls of the camera, and hope you are finding this helpful. Don't forget to click subscribe to our channel, because the next few videos coming up should be a lot more exciting than these last few have been.